If I told you guys that I owned over 500 companies that were all successful and profitable, it required almost no work on my end. Not almost. It does require no work on my end. Would you believe me? Probably not, right? Now, what if I also told you that in this video, I'm going to teach you how you can also own over 500 companies that are all extremely profitable and require zero work. You guys ready? The answer is the stock market. Now, is this title a little bit of a clickbait? Yes. Yes, it is. But you know what? I gotta get my views, so sorry. But it's true. It is a true statement. It's technically true. And the reason it's true is because when you invest in the stock market, it's not gambling as many people like to think it is. It's ownership. You're effectively buying a small portion of ownership in a company whenever you invest in the stock market. So if we're talking individual stocks, if you were to buy 100 shares of Coca-Cola, you're effectively a very, very, very tiny minority owner of the company. Now, if somehow you became extremely wealthy and you were able to buy millions and millions of shares of Coca-Cola and you acquired over 50% of all outstanding shares, then yes, you would become the majority owner and you would be able to influence decisions, etc. But because you only buy 100 shares, you're still an owner. You don't get to influence decisions, or sometimes you do, because a lot of these companies will have shareholder meetings where you can vote on certain things. So in a way, yes, you do have a say in how the company is run, but not so much the day-to-day stuff, right? We leave that to the CEO and whoever he chooses to hire. But yes, effectively, when you buy 100 shares of Coca-Cola, you become a very, very small owner. And what that grants you is you get access to their cash flow. So when you buy Coca-Cola, every quarter they'll pay you out a dividend, and you get to keep that dividend. And the dividend is based off how much cash the company is generating. So the more shares you acquire, the more dividend you get. That's one way, you can make money. The second way is the share price of Coca-Cola in general is likely just going to keep going up, because the company's going to find more ways to become profitable. They're going to increase their market share, increase different types of revenue streams, etc. They have thousands of employees working hard every single day to help the company stay profitable. And you don't have to do anything. You just buy the shares online, and that's all you do. So how do I own over 500 companies? Well, I buy the S&P 500. That is a tracker that essentially tracks 500 companies, 500 public companies, and there's pretty strict requirements in order to get into the S&P 500. I don't know the requirements off the top of my head, but I do know one of the requirements is for the company to be profitable for a certain period of time. Now, if a company does very poorly for a certain amount of time, they actually get kicked out of the S&P 500 and they get replaced by another company. So it's a pretty cool system. Now, when I say S&P 500, some people might refer to very specifically that S&P 500, the 500 companies, but I use it interchangeably with ETFs. And just in general, what I mean by that is I like to invest in a bunch of companies to diversify my risk, right? So I'm not just buying the S&P 500, I'm buying thousands of companies. And the way you do that is you buy an ETF, right? So if you buy an ETF called VTI, I don't know the exact number of companies in VTI, but it's certainly over 500. Now, in addition to that, I also buy international stocks. So I buy a international ETF. I personally buy SCHF, but it doesn't really matter what you do as long as it's relatively diversified, because the returns are, for the most part, pretty much the same. And so that is how I own over 500 companies. And every week I buy more and more and more. And by doing so, that's really how you're going to be able to create generational wealth for your family, right? Is by, because you're not going to be able to do it just by saving cash and putting it in a bank. It needs to grow, and the best way to grow right now is through the stock market. And the best part is it requires so little work. You could buy real estate, but real estate is not super passive. It does require a lot of work, and it requires, I personally think a bit more risk, right? If the tenant stops paying you for rent, you're kind of screwed for a couple months. Whereas stock market, yes, it'll go up, yes, it'll go down, but the general consensus is if you just think long term, 30, 40 years, it's pretty much very, very unlikely that the price of all of your stocks that you bought is going to be the same exact price as when you bought it 30 years ago. Extremely unlikely. So I would encourage you, if you're watching this video and you haven't started investing, start doing that right now. And I think a good way to think about it is you're becoming an owner of multiple companies, right? It's by far the easiest way to become an owner of a company. And I think I want to touch upon what I said earlier. Investing and gambling are not the same thing. When you gamble, you're placing a bet on a yes or no situation. It's black or white. You either win or you lose. So if you're betting on the weather, you're gonna say, I think tomorrow it's going to rain. It's either gonna happen or it's not gonna happen. If it happens, you win money. If it doesn't happen, you lose all of your money. If you put a bet for $100, your $100 is gone. If you win, maybe you win $150. So you make a $50 profit. That's what gambling is, right? You're trying to make a prediction of an event that's going to happen. When you invest in the stock market, you're not necessarily trying to make a prediction. What you are doing is you're buying ownership of companies that are extremely profitable, and I guess you're basically predicting that they're going to continue to be profitable. But the difference is you're not going to lose all of your money. Whereas in gambling, you can lose all of your money. Unless, of course, you buy an individual stock. If you put all of your money into, for example, Coca-Cola, there is a risk that Coca-Cola could go bankrupt and the company's worth $0, right? It's pretty unlikely. Now, what's even more unlikely is if you bought tiny shares of 500 public companies. What are the odds that all 500 companies fail? Extremely unlikely. Extremely, right? When you gamble, what are the odds that you're wrong and it doesn't rain tomorrow? It's pretty freaking high, right? So the risk profile of investing and gambling are completely different. The mindset is also completely different. In gambling, you're waiting yes or no, yes or no. In investing, you're not waiting yes or no. You're not thinking, oh my gosh, I think my investment is going to double by next week. Investing is very long term. You might think, okay, my investment might double in like 10 years, sure, but it's never super short term. You can, of course, gamble in the stock market, but that's not what I'm encouraging, right? So an example of gambling would be, I'm going to buy $100,000 worth of Coca-Cola shares because I think it's going to go up 5% tomorrow. And that's the only reason why you're buying. You just have a hunch that it's going to go up 5%. That's gambling. But what's not gambling is I'm gonna buy $100,000 worth of the S&P 500 because historically it has given 8 to 10% returns, and I have a belief that these companies will continue to find ways to become profitable, to generate revenue, to expand, and I want to be a part of that growth. Right? A little bit different. So, in a nutshell, this point of this video is just to encourage you to invest in the stock market. And one way to look at investing in the stock market is you're acquiring ownership of companies. So it's kind of fun, you know, it's to think about. Even if you put in just $100 in the stock market, you're technically a small owner, and I think that's kind of cool. I think it's like a fun way to think about it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys tune in for the next video. Hope you guys found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching.